Wow, that always catches me by surprise. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Regional Transit Partnership meeting. This is Thursday, June the 24th, and we're glad to see everybody here. I will start the meeting with our notice of electronic meeting due to COVID-19 state of emergency. The governor has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the Regional Transit Partnership to assemble in a single location. This meeting and the required public hearings will be held utilizing electronic virtual communication with the Zoom software application and in accordance with virtual meeting procedures and policies as outlined in item 4.0-01 of the Virginia State Budget, House Bill 29, as effective April 24th, 2020. The meeting will be recorded and made available to the public at the TJPDC website, tjpdc.org. And with that, our first order of business, Jessica is going to call the roll. I feel like I'm in school again as a teacher, but she's going to call the roll. And if you will please unmute yourself and just say aye or present, let her know. And Gretchen is following to try and make sure she has a list of everybody that's attending. So that would be lovely. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Diantha. Diantha McKeel, Albemarle County.
I am here.
Lucas Ames, JAUNT Urban Representative. I think he was going to be missing this week. B. Lepisto Kirtley, Albemarle County.
Here.
Lloyd Snook, City of Charlottesville.
I'm here.
Nakaya Walker, City of Charlottesville.
I'm present. I'm going to have to jump off in a few. I'll put it in the chat at the time, but I'll be back. So I'm going to miss a portion.
Thanks, Mayor Walker. Randy Parker, JAUNT Rural Representative.
Present.
Becca White, UVA UTS.
I'm here.
Garland Williams, CAT staff and Charlottesville Student Transportation.
Present.
Stephen Johnson, JAUNT staff.
Present.
Jim Foley, Albemarle County Student Transportation.
I am here.
Sandy Shackelford, Charlottesville Albemarle MPO staff.
I'm here.
Sarah Pennington, rideshare.
Here.
Sally LeBeau, UVA Hospital. No Sally. Peter Thompson, Charlottesville Area Alliance.
Present.
We also have some non-members who are here to present. Do we want to introduce them as well?
Plus, Neil Sherman's here also.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you. Neil Sherman.
That's right. I don't mind. I don't mind.
Neil, we don't want to leave you out. Why don't we introduce the panelists as we go through the meeting? That'll work.
Sounds great. That concludes the roll call.
All right, I'm sorry.
All right, that's great. We got Neil, so we have Neil. That's all right. Our first agenda item, it matters from the public, and we will go forward with a public comment. Jessica has a timer, so you have those that are here to speak. You have 3 minutes, and Jessica will let you know when your 3 minutes is up. So I can't tell Jessica who's on, but I hope you can.
Yes, we had a request from Ethan Hale to speak.
Ethan, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Diantha, and good afternoon to everyone else. My name is Ethan Heil, and I'm a daily CAT commuter in Charlottesville. Last September, I was excited to hear of my appointment to the CAT Advisory Board. Unfortunately, since then, I haven't received any follow-up communication, and I can only imagine the degree to which last year has stretched everyone's time and resources, and can understand that other matters have taken priority. But moving forward, I'm hopeful, and I respectfully request that we could find an opportunity to re-engage the CAT Advisory Board. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the past year has been highly disruptive time for many of us, and I feel like this is disproportionately more so for those who rely on public transportation. So in my opinion, I feel like now is the perfect time to re-engage the public and solicit advisement from members of our community as we move forward. And I'm willing to offer my time in whatever way possible and happy to take suggestions. And I'll also commend Kat and its staff for committing to fare-free rides for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Do we have anyone else, Jessica?
Yes, we have a request from Caetano from C3.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Dear Regional Transit Partnership Board members, my name is Caetano de Campos Lopez. I am a Charlottesville resident and the Climate Policy Director of the Community Climate Collaborative, C3. We all know that climate is changing. In 2020, US saw the worst fire season in the modern history of the West. And as a result of human-caused climate change, Western US is currently experiencing what it's called a mega drought, the second worst in 1,200 years. Fortunately, Charlottesville City Council, the Albemarle Board of Supervisors, and UVA recently set ambitious targets to strongly reduce climate pollution. In Virginia, the largest share of climate pollution comes from the transportation sector. Our community needs to allocate more resources for our transit systems so that it can be the climate solution it needs to be, helping curbing pollution while promoting a just transition to a cleaner future. The good news is that the Regional Transit Partnership is already set to lead the way. C3 is incredibly grateful to their RTP's work towards its vision of providing all residents with access to employment opportunities and community services in a way that catalyzes actable and sustainable redevelopment. We are also particularly grateful to Kat's leadership in moving to a fare-free system and working towards improving its reliability and frequency in order to improve the service's quality and rebound historically low ridership levels. In that direction, we also applied CAT's request to replace 7 buses and add 4 more buses to its fleet, and the agency's initiative to conduct a study to assess the best options for complementing its current fleet with alternative fueled buses. However, while the city's climate action plan is still under development, we must ensure that major decisions will not hinder us from reaching our climate goals by prolonging our reliance on fossil fuels. For that reason, on behalf of 11 nonprofit and for-profit organizations, C3 presented today a letter to recommend a number of crucial elements that must be considered by CAT and other RTP members in order to ensure that major decisions about alternative fuel buses are based on all the necessary information and with sufficient community feedback. We kindly hope that you will consider our recommendations. Thanks so much for your time and support.
Thank you. And you have a copy of a letter?
Yes, I do.
So if you'll make sure that Jessica receives that, then we'll make sure that
Okay.
everyone sees it.
All right, it would be
Appreciate
my pleasure.
it.
Thank you so
it'll become
much.
part of the minutes. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Next agenda item, approval of the meeting minutes that were in your packet, and they are from May, of course, May of this year. And were there any edits or corrections anyone had for the minutes? And hearing none or
I
seeing,
have one, Diantha.
oh, sure.
In the
Kristen.
note, in the statement of emergency, note the incorrect date is listed for when the meeting was made available on the website. So we'll adjust that date to be the appropriate one. It still says March. We just need to update it to May.
Okay, all right. And I didn't catch that, I guess. Huh. All right, that makes sense. Right, so I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
So moved, and was that Randy?
Yes.
Randy, I think. Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Second from B. So we have a motion to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
No, but I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
So abstentions would be Becca
Thank you.
and anyone else?
I abstain.
Lloyd I think it's Lloyd, right?
Yes, I am abstaining.
Okay, so they were not at the last meeting.
Right.
Stephen also abstains.
I'm sorry, who?
Stephen.
Stephen. Okay, great. Thank you. There's a little delay and I apologize for talking over you. But anyway, so we have 3 abstentions, so the minutes have passed. And then the next item on the agenda is our member spotlight. And Becca and Jim Foley, I believe it's your opportunity to shine. You all volunteered. Thank you very much. And this is an opportunity to just get to know folks on the RTP and talk a little bit about your interest in transit and what you love doing. So I'm going to turn, I don't know which one of you wants to go first.
Ladies first, unless you want me to go first, Becca.
Well, that's okay. I'll go first. It's great to see everybody and talk about my favorite subject, UTS and transit. Those that have known me a while, but some haven't. I entered the transit world in 1982. I was a math major, so I can figure out that that was 39 years ago. Some of the people on the call know that one of my best buddies in college, pre-bus driving, believe it or not, was Evan Kittredge, who was a very major figure in regional transit and university transit at the time. He had started being a student bus driver the year before I did. And he said, Becca, you have got to become a bus driver. It's the best job on grounds. And he literally took me by the hand and I applied for that job. And the rest is history. My parents, would have never thought I would spend my entire career in this field, but I love it. I love it just as much today as I did in 1982 when I got what was then a chauffeur's license. I'd like the record to show I still hold my CDL and still drive and still do the in-services for training to keep myself proficient. But I love everything about it. That was one of the questions. And, I just love the role that transit plays, on grounds, in events, in emergencies, in land use choices, in people's lifestyle choices. It's just a really interesting thing. And in the future, I'm really looking forward to the continued relationship between CAT and JAUNT and RTP and UVA to really work through this transit vision plan and really find these ways that we can partner and collaborate. So thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. And I salute Evan Kittredge for bringing me into this career. Thank you.
That was really fun, Becca. I didn't realize how you got started with your career. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Evan and I went to elementary school together. So, so there you go.
All right, Jim, you're on. See if you can beat that one.
Well, that's going to be difficult. Yeah, I'm Jim Foley. I'm the Director of Transportation for Albemarle County Public Schools. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I parlayed that into a bus driving career. So I've spent 30 years in manufacturing management, mostly in California. I worked in Silicon Valley for a while. I was a process engineer in a chocolate factory for a couple, 3 years. I was a plant manager of Cargill Salt. So we made salt out of bay water from San Francisco Bay. I did that for about 20 years. And then my last 2 years out there, I was a VP of operations for a jelly bean plant in South San Francisco. So made lots of jelly beans. You may not know this. It takes 2 weeks to make a jelly bean. Anyway, I moved to Charlottesville in 2008. And guess what? There's no manufacturing in Charlottesville. So I started with Albemarle County Public Schools in 2010. I became interested in transit mostly as a result of my job. I enjoy making improvements, and that might be for employees, wages, benefits, to try to improve retention and recruiting. Operationally, I'm very data driven, but I enjoy making those kind of improvements as well, and equipment. So, some of the equipment we put on our buses are cameras that see in between all the seats, so the students can't say, "Oh, hey, I didn't do it. Well, yeah, you did. I'm working on stop arm cameras, and today we submitted our application to receive grant funding for 2 electric school buses. So we hope to get those. And I'm excited about how RTP has been together for a few years. I think I've been part of it for 2, and I'm excited to see how we can work together to make some regional improvements. So, and lastly, I drive old JAUNT buses on the weekend for Hop On. So, if you want to do a wine tour, a brewery tour, Hop On's the way to go. We're out there saving lives, actually. So that's my story.
Well, that's pretty cool. I must admit, I see a pattern with candy and wine. Oh, well, maybe you could open up a jelly bean factory here, and then we could have some manufacturing, Jim. That would be
sure. Absolutely.
Yes, I just have a quick question for Jim. I know you said you're putting cameras on the school buses, which I think is fantastic. Are you also setting up speed cameras for school zones?
Well, that's Albemarle County Police area. You'd have to ask them about that. I know we have just tied in our school warning signs at the high schools that make them programmable. So we can set that to the actual start of the school day. It varies sometimes with weather and school schedule. So we have that, but we don't do speed enforcement. I work with the ACPD, and they've been very helpful. If we need a certain area looked at more closely. But I think in the next year or two, COVID kind of put a halt to it, but I want to put the stop arm cameras on our buses, because when I drive 2 out of 3 times, somebody runs my lights. And that's the most dangerous part of the ride for students. You get on that bus, overall, the bus is 8 times safer than parent transportation and 40 times safer than teen transportation. So yeah, I get it. It's not cool to ride a school bus when you're a senior, but it's a lot safer. So I hope that
only the Albemarle County Police can set up speed cameras in a school zone.
Yes.
But
correct.
That is permitted, correct?
I don't know, Trevor, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this. I'm not sure.
I can weigh in on that because I talked about this at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. I've already called the General Assembly has given us the ability to put speed cameras at school zones.
Zones, right.
School zones.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah,
That's great news.
I'm telling everybody that, so it works, and be brought it up so everybody can know. So we do have that ability now. And Albemarle County Police, at my request, because I'm very interested right now in one over at Albemarle High School because of hydraulic road and lots of issues over there. So they are investigating what it would take manpower wise and the money it will cost and everything. And then they're going to be coming back to the Board of Supervisors, information and a recommendation.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
And we have to get all that information before we can actually do it. But just so you know, we do have the authority now to put speed cameras along school zones.
Right.
Oh, that's great news.
Yeah, I knew that. I didn't know if we had already started, if the school has been working with the police department or whatever. Okay, thank you.
So the Albemarle County Police Department is working on it. They'll be reporting back to us, and it really will help safety at our school intersections.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think I finished second to Becca, but that's okay.
Well, I really like the jelly beans. The jelly beans were hard to beat. All right. Let's see where else we're going now. I have to look at SmartScale application assistance for transit. And this is going to be presented to us by Chuck Proctor, who is one of the all-time great famous VDOT folks. And I saw Chuck's name on the screen a few minutes ago. Chuck, would you like to show your face? Can you?
Yeah, I don't have a camera, but
okay.
I'm on the call.
Okay.
Technology, my computer hasn't been replaced since before COVID started, so it hasn't been upgraded with a camera yet. But yeah, I will try to give you an update on this transit assistance. For SmartScale, what we do is we work with all the localities to help them put their applications together. And in recent years, that's been extended out to the transit folks. We haven't had a lot, but I know DRPT last round helped us out with a lot of their scoring and helping with some of the validation of some of the applications. They've also put together a sheet that's part of the resource package that you can put in with your application. But basically what we can do, what the assistance we provide is we can help you develop sketches for infrastructure improvements. If you want to put out a bus pull out, or you're going to be doing bus stops, or something along those lines. Even bike pedestrian facilities to and from a transit stop. Can also look at park and ride lots. I know we've submitted several of them over the years with bus turnarounds and those kind of things. And what we do is we develop the sketches, and we can put together the cost estimates for you, and then we can help you complete the application. But I mean, that's pretty much my stick on for what we can try to do for you all. Once we identify the locations, we can work with you on putting together that information so that you'll have it for your application. But like said, generally, I know we've had, in our district, it's mainly been park and ride lots, mainly bike and pedestrian. We put up some shelters, but usually those are in conjunction with other projects, but we can do those as standalone. I know in Northern Virginia, they have done a lot of stuff around rail and done platform extensions and parking lots for those facilities. So those can be submitted as SmartScale applications also. Any questions? I mean, that's pretty much all I have right now.
So Chuck, would you just give us your official title for the record? Because I bet Gretchen is wanting to have it for the minutes.
Okay, I am the Culpeper District Planning Manager, and I'm also the SmartScale point of contact for the district.
Great, for Culpeper District. And so let me just open it up. We could hear you fairly well, Chuck. Does anybody have any questions? I honestly didn't know that all of that was available. I guess I never really thought about it, but that does sound like it could come in handy to have that expert advice at times.
So I'm sorry, this is Becca. It sounds like then a multimodal passenger platform that multiple services could service could be a SmartScale. It would be subject to the same submission limits that already exist for the municipalities and the MPO, correct? Like
that's correct. I mean, the
yeah.
transit agencies have the ability to submit applications also. We just haven't had any from the transit agencies in the past.
Okay.
But they can submit up to 4 applications.
Oh, and so it's additive. The transit agency adds 4 more that could be considered. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking about it in terms of one of our future agenda items today, the Union Station and opportunities there. Thank you.
And it may be, maybe I'm off base, but it might be with our work around our transit grant work, our regional as well as our Albemarle County, we may very well want to think about this in the future as well through that lens. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to say, I know we're looking at a possible location for a park and ride lot out in Pantops, since the one out there was closed a year or so ago. We just got approval of for a park and ride lot in out at exit 107 near Crozet. It includes a bus pull around, a turnaround. So when that's built, I know that they're running a transit route from over the valley, over the mountain into Charlottesville. And once that lot's open, that will be another stop on that line. So these are the kind of things we're trying to look at, and can work with our transit providers to get those done. But it doesn't have to be a project that the region does or the locality does. The transit provider can also submit those.
And B, go ahead.
Yes, Charles, where's the one on Pantops, or is there one on Pantops? You mentioned Pantops, Park and Ride.
There's not one on Pantops right now, and that's part of one of the things we've got a study that's going to kick off next month to look at the portion of Pantops 250 from Hanson's Road down to the interchange. And as part of that study, we're going to explore if there's any opportunities for a park and ride lot in the area to replace the one that was closed at the shopping center that a year or two ago.
And why was that one closed?
Well, the owner of the shopping center didn't want the parking. They had basically park and ride spaces available in their parking lot, and they basically did away with those spaces in their parking lot. So now the only one we have is out at park just north of
Dardentown.
Dardentown Park. There's a park and ride lot, but it's got problems because it closes at dark. So and there's very little utilization of it. So we need something out in that area because we don't have one currently.
Okay, so Charles, you were mentioning Pantops, that was in the Giant Shopping Center, correct?
It was that shopping center on the south side of 250, right as you go across the bridge.
The one with the Food Lion, B.
Oh,
Yeah.
with the food
Yeah.
line. Oh, okay.
Great Eastern Management.
Yeah, they had plenty of parking.
So this brings up something interesting that maybe this group would like to talk about at some point. I have had transportation folks, experts, professionals say to me that you have to be very careful about park and rides because the studies show that they don't always work. It depends on how they're built and the circumstances. I know, for example, that the University of Virginia Park and Ride obviously works. That's sort of a different scenario. I would think it'd be interesting sometime. Chuck, can you do that for us to have, or maybe Jessica, but I would love to know more about park and rides because I know many have been closed over in the country because nobody utilizes them. And I'd like to know more about how to build one properly. Anyway, just something for us to think about.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. We've got one on Route 28 up in Fauquier County in the Midland area that they built as part of a road improvement project, and it's never used at all.
Yeah. And the studies show that the more of them,
100 spaces in it.
Yeah, the studies show that more of them are not used than are used. It kind of depends on what you're doing with them and where they are and the use. For example, obviously UTS is park and ride is very successful, but that's a little different animal, like I just said. I'd love to have that at some point if there's interest as an agenda item for us to talk about the pros and cons and the studies around it. Anyway, I think it'd be interesting.
I'd like to hear that
We have a
too.
tool. We have a tool that TMPD had one of their consultants put together that basically does sort of analysis, and it doesn't give you the exact, but it can predict where the best location for a park and ride lot is.
Yeah, because we're talking about park and ride lots, Chuck, and we don't want to go out and take good, valuable land or space and end up with, I mean, we just need to know what we're doing before we
Definitely.
Yeah.
I know we've looked at a couple out in that area, but we just haven't moved forward with any of those locations. So we just need to maybe investigate that a little bit further. And that's what I want to try to do with this study, in addition to the other improvements on that corridor.
Becca, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, we'll wait for that analysis, but it really isn't, it's not a park and ride for park and ride's sake. You have to, it has to be the right amenities. It has to be just lighted properly. It has to have waiting areas. It has to be linked to either transit or carpool trips. And, it's So it can be very successful, but it's not a park and ride for park and ride's sake. So I'm sure that there's some great sort of check sheets or, you know, a minute analysis that you could analyze whether a site would work or not. And then once you decide where the site is, how you support it, because it's not going to work unless you link these other things.
I just think it'd be an interesting agenda item for us at some
Oh
point.
yeah, because there's there is an art and a science to it. There is science to it. So yeah.
Jessica's making a note. She's going to put that on our ticklers list for an agenda item at some point. Chuck, did you have anything else? Or are there any other questions for Chuck? Garland.
So I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut across Chuck. Hey, you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the key main consultants on the park and ride study at the state level has been Kimberly Horn, helping VDRPT. We actually have them under contract. They're working on our study when that kicks off. So we have the group that's plugged into the park and ride study, you know, as we look at the 29 corridor. Yes, it can't be just for park and ride sake. It has to be a coordinated effort. What makes sense and you know, kind of the activity, you kind of build it in, whether it's specifically for you know, like the for example, making sure that there was additional parking to support the university. That would help move their employees from a designated park and ride up on 29 down into the university. Would be a good use of a park and ride lot. Would also add a hub for transit where we'd have a dedicated restrooms for our facilities and moving forward, whether it's CAT or JAUNT could be able to use that. One thing we noticed during the pandemic was a need to have our own facilities because a lot of the facilities were closed where our people were going to use the restroom. So it is important that we look at our infrastructure, not just in the prism of just a park and ride, but longer term as to, you know, how we build it out so we can support growth.
So we'll bring this back for further discussion. It sounds like you may have some help with that agenda item, Garland. That's great. Right. I'm trying to keep us moving here. Does anybody else have any questions for Chuck? Are we ready to move on? Chuck, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. Maybe we can all write a letter and ask them to buy you and upgrade your laptop so you can have a camera.
Well, I can go in and get an upgrade. I just need to go into the office and do it. So
okay. Well, that makes me feel better. All right, dear. See you later. So the next agenda item is our remote meeting participation. And David, I think I'm turning this one over to you. If you'll introduce yourself. And...
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, for those that don't know you, I'm David Blunt. I'm the Deputy Director at TJPDC. I'm also the Director of Legislative Services, and I serve as the Commission's FOIA officer as well. The item before you is for you to consider adopting a policy to allow remote electronic participation by members of the RTP. And this is actually something that's been in the code for a number of years. In fact, you know, the commission, TJPDC commission, just adopted this earlier this month, which had not adopted the policy yet. But I think it's certainly pertinent as we look to sometime in the future, going back to in-person meetings. It does afford some flexibility for participation by the members of the public body to participate remotely under certain conditions. And those are for personal matters and for certain you know, temporary or permanent medical condition, or taking care of a family member who has a medical condition. I guess the following the memo is the actual policy, which really lays out the process that would have to be undertaken for an individual to notify the chairman of the desire to participate. And then this policy, you know, that actually sets out the process that the public body, the RTP, would follow in either approving or disapproving that member's participation at any given meeting. So I think it's pretty straightforward. What the policy is, I'll give credit to Albemarle County in that this was largely adopted from provisions that you all include, I believe, that are in your operating procedures for the board. I would offer a very small amendment. Just I think it would be clarifying in the very last section of the policy, section E, where it says electronic participation by the absent board member as provided in this policy for personal matters would be an addition, because there was a change in the legislation this past year that takes effect July 1 to add the 25% provision. Currently, it's just the being 2 meetings per year. And then there's just a typo there in the second line, meetings rounded up to the next whole number.
So you have more than one. Help me with those changes again. So we're talking about, run through those changes again. I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of them.
Yeah, so there are 2 different reasons I think that are most applicable for this body to allow remote participation. One is for a personal matter, and the other is for those medical conditions or disability related provisions. The new language that was adopted that will take effect July 1st. Right now, you can utilize this remote participation for up to 2 meetings per year. The additional language was 25% of the meetings rounded up to the next whole number, but that is only applicable to the personal matters part. It doesn't apply to the medical condition or disability part.
Okay, I see. I'm understanding now what you're saying. All right. So how would you reword that if we're going to vote on this, or what's your suggested language then?
Just that you would insert on the first line after in this policy, you would insert for personal matters.
Okay. All right.
And then again, the typo in the second line would be meetings rounded up. There should be TO added after rounded up.
Oh, 2.
So,
yes.
Yes. So my apologies for that.
I see now. Thank you. That helped me a lot.
Yep. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
So questions, folks, for David about this policy?
Can I make a comment, Diantha?
Absolutely. Sure.
I certainly know that there's benefits to meeting in person. Doesn't meeting remotely reduce carbon?
Mm-hmm.
So especially this group, should we maybe encourage remote participation instead of it being by exception?
You would think, but I'll let David address that because that's an issue for, I think, the General Assembly.
Yes, thank you for that. And as you can imagine, with the last 15 months and what we've seen with meetings at all levels being conducted electronically, there has been a lot of discussion at the state level and ongoing. In fact, I was listening in on a FOIA advisory council meeting earlier today. A lot of discussion among the stakeholders about what electronic meetings and participation both by members of the public body as well as continued participation or enhanced participation by members of the public, what that all looks like post-COVID and whatever our next normal will be. But this policy that is before you is based on the law as it's currently written, and it's reflective of members of a public body being able to participate remotely under the conditions that are included in the policy. So that's not to say that during the next General Assembly session that there may be some additional changes that are made that would necessitate coming back and revising this policy.
Diantha, and I'm sure Charlottesville also, I know on the school side, we have lobbyists that go and lobby the General Assembly. Is that something that you'd put on your agenda to discuss with the local state delegates and senators?
Yeah, I think B, if I remember correctly, and I'll make sure B corrects me if I'm wrong, but we've asked Greg Campner to put that on our legislative agenda for our packet already.
Okay.
I mean, we've already done that because I agree with you. Yes. And even this, your principal residence has to be 60 miles. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I didn't mention that one, Madam Chair. I didn't know that for this particular group, would come into play, and even for the PDC, with kind of a broader cast of the net, probably wouldn't come into play until you get to maybe a Go Virginia region, where you're encompassing maybe 2 different PDCs, and you have a meeting at one, at the very end of one region and a member from the very other end. So that one I don't know is utilized all that much.
So does Greg do the actual lobbying, or is there someone on staff that does
No,
it?
he will bring back to, and what I meant was that Greg Campner, the county attorney, will bring back to us, and probably towards the end of the summer, our legislative packet for approval and what we will be requesting. And this, we've already asked him to have this on our packet.
Okay, great. Yeah, so, but I know, like on our side, Helen Dunn does a lot of the actual lobbying, so I don't know if she can help her.
Jim, my role as Director of Legislative Services is to advocate on behalf of the localities in the region. So that's my other hat.
Okay, so you would serve that function for RTP.
Right. So
I would serve that function for the localities and in the region.
So David will take what we vote on as a Albemarle County and the city, and then advocate for that for us as part.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Sure.
B.
Yes, David, I think the legislature goes back into session for an emergency session August 2nd. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because it would, I think we need to really be forceful on this because we're getting a lot more participation, at least for the committees and commissions, because we're getting a lot more participation via Zoom than in person. So,
yes, yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
That I think has been the rule, in many parts of the state, and I know that the open government advocates have been very complimentary of what local governments in particular have been able to do in affording accessibility by members of the public during COVID in order to increase participation. I'm not sure, I have not seen, there will be an operating resolution that governs the upcoming General Assembly session. And depending on the language of that, I'm not sure if, a bill of this, bills related to FOIA and, amending FOIA would be something would be allowed, because the purposes of which they're being called are really for appropriating the federal stimulus funds and for approving judges. But I'll, certainly if there's an opportunity, to affect some change, we'll see those bills.
Thank you. I just had one other question. I thought that as of July 1, that we would have an additional year. I understand we have 6 months after the emergency is declared over to continue Zoom meetings, but I thought as of July 1, that was extended to a year. But if that's true, how does that work if the emergency ends July 30th or June 30th?
I believe that the provisions under which a lot of folks operate with regard to electronic meetings are tied to the governor's state of emergency, which will be expiring June 30th. However, I believe in Albemarle County's situation, as well as the city of Charlottesville and maybe others, there is a provision in the code that allows for a local emergency to be declared, and for and even another section of the code that allows for the adoption of an ordinance that you all have done and amended on occasion to allow for continuity of your operations. And I think that's what extends for that 6 month period presently. And you are correct that come July 1, that will be allowable for an additional 6 months to be a total of a year.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's very complicated, I know. And in fact, this meeting this afternoon of the FOIA Advisory Council, they were talking about the many different sections in the FOIA law that really speaks to different aspects of the conduct of electronic meetings, whether it's a state body or a local body or a regional body. So you may see some effort over the course of the coming months to try to consolidate all those and make them a little bit clearer and understandable and maybe expand it. I don't know, for everybody.
Thank you, David.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments or questions for David on this topic? Becca, did you have something?
And well, Stephen had his hand up as
Oh,
well.
I didn't see Stevens. I'm sorry. I didn't see Stevens.
I had a quick question about the language at the end of section A. It says the member must identify with specificity the nature of the personal matter. And I was curious how that balances against members' rights to privacy. Would somebody have to share with the chair the name of the family member or the nature of their medical condition? Where is the line there in terms of the specifics that are necessary and what is not?
You know, I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV either. So I would probably that's a great question, and I would probably have to defer that to legal counsel as to how they might interpret that. I'm not aware of any situations as this language has been in the code for some time and where this has been invoked, that there's been any challenge to that, or there's been any case law or court decisions on that. But great question that I will ask when I'm in communication with Mr. Kampner and others. Thank you.
Becca.
Yeah, so B and Stephen asked my two questions. So we could take no action and continue to meet by Zoom for another year, or would there need to be some sort of action taken to allow us to continue as the RTP specifically to continue to meet by Zoom for another year? So I was unclear. It sounded like some kind of action had to be taken to allow for Zoom to continue for another 6 months or year.
So the provisions that we were discussing early with regard to the 6 months and the 12 months, that's applicable for the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, because they have declared a local state of emergency and they have adopted an ordinance that governs their continuity of operations during that state of emergency. That is not applicable, is my understanding, that would not be applicable to this body.
So either so on June 30th, we have to meet in person, and if a member, voting member wants to be counted, wants to be included and counted, we have to pass this policy, then cough up what our specific problem is, have it become part of the minutes, what our personal problem is with specificity, and then the board would vote on whether you can be included or not, meeting by meeting, and it's limited to 2 or rounding up of 25%. Is that right?
All of what you said is correct.
Okay,
and
just making sure I understood it. Because it is a little, I mean, reading the words, I'm like, wow, on the specificity and all that stuff. So, but it doesn't sound like, and I just also want to be clear about what it really means. We're going to start meeting in person, and a member to be counted as a quorum has to follow this process, be voted on at that meeting, and potentially be included or excluded through this policy.
And there may be another option that I would offer up, because there is additional legislation that is taking effect, and I'm trying to find it on my computer. I don't think I have it pulled up. There's some additional legislation that was approved during the General Assembly session that, as I said earlier, provided for electronic meetings in situations where the governor has declared a state of emergency. That provision was amended to also speak to local declarations of states of emergency, which I've said we have in Charlottesville and in Albemarle County. So there is a provision, again, that takes effect July 1 that says that a public body that is in a locality in which the public body is located has declared a state of emergency. So it could be conceivable that City of Charlottesville has declared a state of emergency. This is a public body in the City of Charlottesville that would allow you, as long as the City of Charlottesville has its local emergency, for you to continue your meetings electronically.
And the same would be true of Albemarle, since we've declared a state of emergency as well.
If you had public bodies in Albemarle that were located in Albemarle County outside of Albemarle County government, yes, ma'am.
Right. Yeah.
So if we take no action, we're going to start meeting in person, and if you can't come, you just don't get counted. If we do take action in accordance with this, we start meeting in person, and you could ask via this policy to be counted in the quorum or in the participation meeting by meeting.
But I'm now really confused now because it sounds like, David, that because TJPDC is located in the city, we could continue by Zoom using that will take effect.
If this public body were to utilize that provision of code. But what this policy is that's before you just relates to times when the public body is meeting and there is a quorum that is physically assembled. So let's say it's normal times and this body has a meeting, there's a quorum present, but you have one member who wants to utilize the provision in the code because they have a personal matter or they're sick and wants to participate remotely. That's what this policy before you today is about, those situations.
Right. I mean, otherwise they'd just be absent and there'd be a quorum
Correct.
at the meeting.
That's right.
Correct. But they would be allowed to participate under this policy.
So we really have to separate in our brain what we're doing here from the state of emergency and the, it's the way I'm kind of looking at it.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So are there any other questions now? There may be. So Jessica has this on the agenda as an action item. It doesn't seem like, David, and just to be clear, if we pass this today, this doesn't preclude anything that we would want to do as far as Zoom that might come up in the future. I mean, it doesn't preclude, it only might help an individual board member attend if needed at some point in time.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is the same policy language that other bodies have already adopted, including all that specificity stuff.
This policy was adopted by the commission at its June meeting. Similar provisions are already in place for Albemarle County. It's an optional policy, for public bodies if they want to allow such remote participation.
So it really boils down to, do we want to go on and pass the policy that would allow a board member an occasional ability to, if they were really caught with a personal issue or something, right? And it would seem like to me that's reasonable, but I mean, I'm the will of the board. So it doesn't stop us from anything else that we would do under the COVID emergency or anything, so.
Now, is it just for board members or non-voting members too?
It's for any member of the public body. It doesn't distinguish between voting versus non-voting. And that's the way the code is written. It does not distinguish.
Yeah.
It's a member of a public body.
And you all, everybody that's here right now is a member. So whether you're voting or non-voting, we're considering you a member. Right?
Yeah, and that member would just subject themselves to this. And
Right.
you could choose not to, or if you really want to be there, you could
Right.
subject yourself to this. Okay.
Yeah. And it would be nice to have that option, I would think, for those rare occasions where this might kick in. So any other questions? If we would like, I mean, I can entertain a motion to approve the, I guess, David, I would say the remote electronic participation as presented in the packet as amended.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll move that.
All right, I have a motion by Becca, and is there a second?
Second.
Second by B. So all of those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes, nays, and any abstentions? So I think, David, we have passed the remote electronic participation as amended. That was in our packet.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll look forward to more discussion about the ability to Zoom.
Okay. I'm sure there will be much more. Yes, ma'am.
And we would love it if you'd keep us informed and feel free to come back and talk to us about it because
Sure.
it's a little complicated.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. All right. So Transit Week, Sarah, rideshare, it looks like you're on the agenda.
Yes, I asked Jessica just for a few moments today to kind of start the discussion or to get this on everyone's minds. I know we're all so busy and coming out of the pandemic and there's so much going on, but Tri-Transit Week is usually in September every year. So there is still some time. Last year with COVID, DRPT declared it Tri-Transit Month and focused a lot on safety. I presume this year they will probably go back somewhat to business as normal of doing the week celebration. I thought it might be a nice way for some of our transit providers and rideshare included, since van pooling is part of the public transportation portion of this, to maybe look at doing some promotion or some things together for this. Tri-Transit Week has been going on for about 12 years. I think this will be year 13. And just wanted to get it on everyone's radar to start thinking about ideas of maybe how we might be able to partner together as the agencies and as the RTP to lend some additional promotion and voice to the importance of trying transit in our region. So I welcome any discussions, any ideas, thoughts. Again, mostly just wanted to put it on the radar since I haven't seen the exact dates. In the past, it has been around September 16th, 17th, give or take on the dates.
Okay,
There's
so
there's a Friday football game on September the 24th.
So I'll throw it open for comments or thoughts. Anybody have anything?
Say we could go fare free, but too late.
Right. Well, you know, another brilliant opportunity to maybe really get the word out even more about that particular facet of transit that's going on. I feel like you can never say it too much.
So Sarah, if you have some thoughts or ways that we could help, please come back to us before September, the date, and let us know. And in the meantime, if people have a thought or an idea, they can get it to you.
Absolutely. Rideshare would be happy to help coordinate and put some things together with any of the partners.
Okay. All right. The next item on.
Sorry, I have one more idea on that, and that's the Afton Express, you know, because it should go operational by that time.
Yes.
So that might be another hook.
Yes, we have already been in discussion with CSPDC about, I'm on the steering committee for all of that. So we have been thinking about that as well. But yeah, you know, could be a good time to talk about transit connections between those services and the other services in the area. Absolutely. I feel like, again, the more we can promote, the bigger voice we can lend to public transportation, the better.
Yeah, because Virginia Breeze kind of launched during COVID, so people may not even know that the connections and the reach that it provides between the two, you can get a pretty long distance. So
Great. Any other comments or thoughts? All right. And next item on our agenda is Sam Pitman from TJPDC. You're going to talk to us about the Equitable Driver Appreciation Project and giving us an update.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor McKeel. Give me a second here to see if I can share my screen. Okay, can everyone see this?
We can see it, but you're in your, you might want to go into the full screen mode. You're in your notes mode. Yeah, there you go. We've got it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've had a chance to speak with a couple of you, but not most of you. So I'll give a brief introduction. My name is Sam Pitman. I'm a summer intern at the TJPDC this summer under Jessica, working on transit issues, mostly related to equitable driver appreciation, which we're about to talk about. Just a little about me. I'm going to be a second year Master of Public Policy student at the Batten School at UVA. And since we're on the fare free theme today, I am from the Kansas City area, which back in 2019 became the largest American city to go fare free public transportation on our buses as well as our streetcar. So that's something I'm very passionate about. If anyone ever wants to talk about that or Kansas City, I'd love to talk about it. But today I'm here to talk about equitable driver appreciation, which has been something in the works for a while now, but that's really my key project to tackle this summer. Before we go forward talking about that, I want to go back a few weeks. I know a few of your agencies were in the meeting, but a few weeks ago, there was a Virginia Transit Association forum, which was specifically about driver appreciation and how do we keep recruitment and retention efforts going. Some of the topics discussed in there, which I haven't discussed in some of my one-on-one meetings that I want to cover. The first, there's about 15 to 20 minutes dedicated to talking about more junior operators, seeing where that's where a lot of the turnover is at. I know the last year there has been a lot more turnover than normal among senior operators because of retirement due to COVID, but junior operators is normally where you see people leaving or maybe leaving for better opportunities. So we talked about different strategies relating to how you can better incentivize people who've been around for maybe just a few years to stay on. Things like referral bonuses or maybe even like little workplace benefits here or there, but also trying to balance that to ensure that your senior operators are also happy and that they're not complaining that the junior operators are receiving benefits that they never did. We also discussed how operators, while many do leave for pay, many also leave because of the culture of the workplace. I know that a lot of your agencies have pretty strict budgets, and so pay can't be increased a lot here or there, but I think culture is something that can always be improved. So again, it's some of the little things like drivers maybe talking about how a certain bus stop's at a dangerous intersection, maybe trying to move it down the street a little bit, or even on cold winter days, just putting out coffee to ensure they feel happy and cared about. Another thing we talked about is how government jobs can be intimidating. And it's also something I found in a project I did in my academic program relating to Virginia CPS, how government's scary. People don't always want to interact with it or go looking for jobs at it. They sometimes feel that the bureaucracy is too complicated. And so we talked about different strategies to personalize the agency, open up new lines of communications with operators or mechanics to ensure that they feel like they're being heard. And then finally, we talked about potential for exit interviews when people do decide to leave the agency. This is something that I kind of touched on with Jim Foley during our meeting. And he actually shared a really helpful spreadsheet as to the last 5 years, every operator or even mechanic that has left Albemarle County schools, here's why they left, here's where they're headed, here are some of their concerns. So it's something we talked about in the meeting, but it's also something I think that Albemarle Schools is leading the way on. There are also a few things discussed in the VTA roundtable that I've heard in the meetings I've held so far. And so far, I've had the chance to meet with Rep. Juwan at CAT. I was able to meet with Kendall and Allison at UTS. And like I said, Jim at Albemarle County Schools. And something that came up in each of those meetings is obviously the delays in DMV testing. Again, I know Albemarle County is able to do the written test on site, but I think UTS and CAT are not. This is something that's obviously been going on for a long time. And I know that Delegate Hudson has tried to make some headway in working with the DMV commissioner to try and alleviate or at least lessen some of those time spans. That's still ongoing. So we'll hopefully hope for the future and that lessens. Another thing that's happening is a lot of drivers, once they do get that CDL, they sometimes are attracted to or recruited by other places to go work there. They can keep their Class B and go work for, say, a beer distributor in town and drive a truck around for maybe a little bit more pay. Or sometimes they'll go for that Class A CDL and then drive a tractor trailer around the country. So that's definitely one of the concerns I heard from most agencies. And then when I was talking to Juwan, he brought up something that I hadn't thought about before. And that's how certain government agencies, but also a lot of large employers are starting to move to $15 an hour, which isn't a lot less than some of the agencies pay. Obviously with the agencies, the backlog with the DMV and how it takes a long time, sometimes people want to start making money, the next day or the next week. They don't want to wait the 3 months to try and get their CDL. So it's another thing I want to work on, talking with the agencies in my continuing meetings. How do we try and navigate that? And so again, my long-term project for the summer is the Equitable Driver Appreciation Project. I still need to follow up with JAUNT about meeting, and I was able to get a meeting scheduled with Sherry Eubanks, the Charlottesville schools, early next week to talk about what they're experiencing and some of their concerns. I'm also waiting, Jim, I'll follow up on you about some data on Albemarle schools I was waiting to be approved. But essentially, the long-term goal is to collect a lot of data, which I'll get to in a minute about the specifics, from each of your agencies relating to a bunch of different areas, and put that into a master spreadsheet. And if you're willing to share it with each of you on the collective list. And then using that, so at the end of the summer, when the time comes, we can create a public document detailing all the findings, seeing where the agencies are at and what they're struggling with, but also some strategies possibly to go forward. Of course, this document would have to be approved with each of you with your edits, make sure that you're confirmed and good to go. And I also want to clarify that when I say public, this isn't something that we plan on posting all over the internet or anything like that. But say that you have a potential driver coming in, a recruit, and they want to see, how you stack up maybe against different people and what you can offer, and also your culture. It's something you can show to them and say, hey, here's where we are, here's what we offer. We think we stack up this way. And then also provides an opportunity for the different agencies to work together and try and balance each other out. So on that first part I talked about, which is the master spreadsheet, we're actually using about 60 different metrics to compare all the different transit agencies. It covers very basic topics like pay, but also different recruitment strategies and reasons for people leaving, how long before someone can get behind the wheel by themselves. These fit kind of neatly into 7 different categories, which do cover most of the agencies. I will say that one of them is related to student drivers, which just applies to UTS. I don't know, and I kind of don't hope that Charlottesville and Albemarle schools doesn't have any plans to let any middle schoolers or potentially high schoolers start driving buses around. But of course, we'll consider all options. Again, it addresses measurable figures like driver outcomes and hiring practices. And I also want to stress that this is a living document. In each meeting I've taken so far with the different agencies, I've always learned something new. I've learned how, mechanics and recruiting them is also facing issues. So maybe that's something for the future to cover. And also just different concerns among drivers and things like that. So kind of the bulk of presentation I want to talk about is peer cities and how Charlottesville stacks up against other places around the country, how we can learn from them and maybe take their best practices. But also, using those to create strategies that maybe in the long run they take from us. And so I took a look at, all these different metrics where how Charlottesville stacks up against other cities, such as metro population, whether or not they're university town. Here, obviously, we have to deal with Charlottesville and Albemarle. I know JAUNT's also interacting with the different counties around there. So look at places like Duluth, Minnesota, which covers Minnesota and Wisconsin, and how they interact with both state governments. The weather, which I'll get to in a minute, and then finally the scope of the transit system. I wanted to ensure that we had a little diversity in different transit systems, but I didn't want to pick cities that just had a shuttle on one street going back and forth. But I also didn't want to include places like Boston, which has a subway and light rail. And so in doing that, I was able to come up with a list of about 10 cities that I feel like Charlottesville stacks up against best. They are places like Lynchburg, which is right down the road, but also places that are similar in climate, places that have very different climates, places that do have large universities and places that don't. Places where I feel like, from my research, the transit agencies experience many of the same problems. And of course, one of those same problems that is experienced not just here in the area or in the state is the driver shortage. This isn't just a Virginia thing. It's happening in the Ann Arbor area, in Urbana-Champaign, in Duluth. It's something that everybody's dealing with kind of in different ways. And so again, if we can learn from those best practices and see who's really succeeding at recruiting new drivers and also retaining their current ones, maybe there are strategies that we can move here. And then also, like I said, coming up with our own strategies that when other places are looking for their best practices, they look to Charlottesville and Albemarle. And then finally, why are we collecting these peer cities? Again, like I said, they're for best practices, but also for the potential for a spring speaker series. I think it'd be really interesting to bring in people from, like I said, Duluth, and understand why, they got a bunch of electric buses back in 2015, and they've been experiencing a lot of problems with them in the weather and in the terrain and all that. So learn some of the strategies that they're utilizing to fix some of those issues. Again, if anybody here has been interacting or knows people in different local or county governments or in transit around the country, and you think they're doing really cool things, I would love to know about that. I'd love to include that in the list. Again, seeing what strategies they're using that works. I'm open to any recommendations. And so that's all I have. I'd love to try and answer any questions, but of course, if I can't, I'd invite Jessica to try and answer them. And if not, we can definitely follow up with you. But yeah, any questions?
Sam, I think you're off to a great start. I look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with, but great job so far. Thank you.
Opening it up to other folks. Comments or thoughts or suggestions?
Sam, this is Becca. When you list that you're putting this data into the from agencies, are those just our agencies, or are they state agencies or national agencies, or it's just our agencies?
Yeah, I should have clarified. So they're the 5 local transit agencies I have, which is CAT, UTS, JAUNT, Charlottesville Schools, and Albemarle Schools. I know JAUNT provided me with some information about how Charlottesville stacks up against some of the other state transit agencies or local transit agencies in Virginia, like Lynchburg and Richmond and a few other places. And I'd be happy to share that with you. But the list I'm collecting is just the local agencies that are part of the Regional Transit Partnership.
And since culture is such a big thing, I imagine, can you give a few examples of the data elements that are trying to get at that culture, the work culture thing? And by the way, the $15 an hour thing, almost every single one of our bus drivers got a raise to $15 when it went to that. So, but could you give a few examples of the data, those many elements that might be on the culture or subjective side?
Yeah, so I think a few of the data points are related to like why people leave specifically or reason for leaving. But also a lot of it is more database, such as like numbers, like in performance incentives, recruitment bonuses, all of that. So I think that is kind of a big part of the culture. If people feel like they're bringing new drivers in and filling that shortage, but they're not being compensated for that, I think they can kind of feel a little put off by that. I have friends that have recruited recruited other friends to their companies outside of the transit sphere. They didn't get compensated for that, and they felt like they weren't cared about. Some of them eventually left their places of work. So I think it's something that specifically is really important to focus on.
Any other comments or questions from anyone? I will make a suggestion, Sam, something that I've talked about off and on for the last year or so. And it involves our 2 public schools, Charlottesville and Albemarle. We have in the urban ring, in the 5 miles around Albemarle, and in the city, we have neighborhoods because of where our schools are located and how our neighborhoods are divided between city and county. We have Albemarle and Charlottesville school buses passing in the same neighborhood and passing on the roads. I think it would be very interesting to look at a study that said if Charlottesville and Albemarle public school bus systems combined, for example, to let Albemarle also run the Charlottesville public school bus. That's all I'm talking about are the public school buses. What would it look like in savings? What would it look like in the number of drivers needed and the buses needed? That plays into reducing our carbon footprint. You'd have one less bus system driving around. I can tell you in Willoughby, for example, the Willoughby neighborhood, Chip Boyles said to me one time, in my neighborhood, Charlottesville and Albemarle buses pass each other all the time. We have a school at Burley where Albemarle buses are passing Charlottesville buses. And I think it behooves us when we're looking at climate change, reducing our footprint, trying to save money. You could all of a sudden have one system. And the reason I pick Albemarle is because Albemarle is the largest and Albemarle delivers in the rural area, which would not want, we couldn't change that. But you'd have one system with drivers with one pay. There would be a lot of advantages to that. And I would be very interested in investigating that. Doesn't say we would end up doing it, but I'd like to see the data on what would be saved if we combined those two public school bus systems.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, like I'd love to invite Jim or Garland or Sherry Eubanks to that conversation. But I do remember there's an RTP subcommittee meeting last June where actually the idea of a master spreadsheet of all the equitable driver ideas came up. In that same meeting, there's the idea for like a master map of all the different bus routes between the different agencies in the Charlottesville area. So I think something like that could be interesting, again, to see where they constantly pass each other and how you could overlap. But yeah, again, I'd let Jim and Garland and Charlottesville and Albemarle schools take the lead on that.
Yeah, and obviously they would have to agree, but before we can even talk about it or they could talk about it, I think we need some data, right? To see, I think it would be worthy of at least investigating. I think certainly the environmental community would be supportive. I don't know. So, and I'm not trying to leave Garland and Jim out of this, but maybe a meeting with folks, you know, Garland and Jim and you, and be interesting to at least, I'd be interested in seeing the data.
Yeah, I'd love to continue working with you on this.
Okay. Anybody else, any thoughts? Whispers?
Yeah, I'd be interested in exploring that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of things we'd have to overcome, but I think out of due diligence, I think we at least need to examine it.
And I actually talked to Chip about this, and Chip said I could talk about it publicly, and he said he thought it would be very interesting to explore. It may be that we'd find it wouldn't save a bit, and you know, it is what it is. But if you could save the number of buses and have all the drivers at the same pay, right? At least you wouldn't, and then you might have some money left over to do some other things that would be equitable, you know, for the drivers and for the system. And I don't have to belabor it, but I really do think it was worthy of so I'd like to put that on the table. B.
Yes, I also think you could have a savings regarding maintenance yards with the combination of maintenance yards. And with the combination of maintenance yards, maybe a reduction in some buses, you could probably even increase the driver's pay, which would be a very good incentive. And I think we'd get more bus drivers that way and be able to hold on to them. So, I mean, I think they're combining the two could actually, usually you get significant, you get a lot of savings and even morale, because one agency is not trying to steal from the other agency. And I think that, so I think that could be a very positive thing. So
what we're doing right now is what I call whack-a-mole between the two public school systems as far as driver salary.
Right.
The other thing I would put on the table is that Albemarle County right now is participating from the school side and will be starting from the county side in looking at proffered land. And part of that study would be possibly moving our old bus depot, school bus depot, up to some proffered land. I'm just saying there's no decision, nothing's happened about it, but we maybe would be building a brand new bus facility, and the timing for that could be very nice if we were looking at something like this. So just saying.
I would add one thing. Maybe Sam could also look at technician pay. Because that's an issue. As you might know, Diantha, you know, when we look at salaries, we look at competitive markets, and right now our HR model is to look at other school districts, but that's not our competition for technicians. And it's the same in building services. So, you know, if we're gonna combine maintenance efforts, I think that needs to be studied too.
That's a great idea.
And Sam's the right guy for that job. I know
it. He just fits the bill, doesn't he? Any other comments or questions? Sam, you have any thoughts?
I would just say that I actually have talked to Chip about this. He mentioned to me that you mentioned to him, Diantha. So I am not opposed to this whatsoever. I think we do need to get the data, so get the process started. Taking a hard look at it. If we're going to do it, we need to go ahead and look at everything, all of the functions. So I think that'll be a good project to kind of take on and really dive into the numbers. It's going to take us a little time, but we do need to get started.
Well, and I think it even marries with both of our communities' environmental plans, right? Our carbon footprint and our environmental plans. It meets very nicely. And I wouldn't have mentioned it, except I talked to Chip and said he said I could talk about it. No,
and I couldn't agree more that Sam is the right person for this. I also want to manage expectations that his internship is 6 weeks and he's on week 2. So I also want to make sure that everybody understands this is not something that he's just going to be able to jump right into. We'll work internally to see what that means for next steps, though. This seems a little beyond what he'll be able to accomplish while he's
here. But at least we could get started, right? If there is an interest, and if he can get us started, then
no doubt. Yep, yeah. I'm definitely not saying I perfectly agree with you.
Yeah, you better get going, Sam.
You know, you could leave the meeting right now, Sam. There's still 3 or 4 hours of daylight.
We'll see. Thank you so much for being willing to listen to my spiel. If I'd love to follow up with any of you on driver appreciation, or at least begin to entertain the idea of other issues, because I'm not here forever. But I can drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out.
Great, thank you. All right, and hearing no more questions for Sam or comments, I guess we'll move on to, where are we here? Oh, our grant update from Jessica.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so the first update I'm going to give you is about the Regional Transit Vision Plan. And just because we have so many transit studies going on, as well as other projects going on in some of the similar areas, I'm just going to reorient you guys with the purpose of the study and some of the details on this slide. So the purpose of the vision plan is for local leaders, transit agencies, and a wide variety of stakeholders to collaboratively develop a clear vision for the future of transit in our region. The early work for this project is going to gather data from a variety of sources to identify the types of transit service that can be supported on travel corridors throughout our region. And the final work product, there's going to be many intermediate work products, but the final work product will be a document that identifies actions the community must take to support the community's vision for high quality transit. We have a budget of $350,000 for this project. Half of that is coming from DRPT as grant funding, a quarter of that is coming from Albemarle County, and a quarter of that is coming from City of Charlottesville. The project has begun. We have our consultants chosen, they have their notice to proceed, and this project will continue through the end of next fiscal year, so June 30th of 2022. So the update I want to give you all is that we have our consultants on board. So an invitation for proposals was sent out in April. We received 3 proposals. They were all excellent proposals. We had many great choices to choose from. The selection committee was appointed by the RTP. That selection committee reviewed the proposals. They interviewed the 2 strongest teams, and they selected the AECOM-led team as best able to meet the project's needs. Now, there's a memo in your packet that goes into all sorts of details about this whole process, but these are the highlights. The selection committee felt it was a really strong team composed of AECOM, Jarrett Walker and Associates, and the local firm EPR. This team had strong experience with similar plans with other vision plans, strong experience with the kinds of technical analyses that we wanted as part of this project. And they have great experience with public engagement, especially the selection committee was very impressed by Jarrett Walker and Associates. The selection committee also really liked AECOM's philosophy. And I think this pull quote really summarizes that for me. So the plan must fuse excellent analysis with clear thinking about the community's goals and aspirations. It must show clearly how widely shared goals lead to specific recommendations and performance measures, and it must think broadly about all the reasons transit can matter to a community and to the lives of its citizens. So as you can see from that quote, this team blends some really strong technical skills with knowledge that this should be community-led, community-driven, and the community needs to be on board by the end of the product. Since we're running a little short on time, I'm going to give my other update as well and then take questions at the very end. So the other update is about the Albemarle County Transit Expansion Study. And again, just to refresh your memories, the purpose of this study, it's a feasibility study and an implementation plan for expanded transit service to population and employment centers within Albemarle County, particularly the Pantops area, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, and along Route 29 North between the city limits and as far north as Engic, and innovative transit options that emphasize accessibility and responsiveness to customer needs are going to be investigated alongside traditional fixed route options. This project has a budget of just over $100,000, with half of it coming from DRPT and the other half coming from Albemarle County. The project began back in April and it will continue through February of next year. So some upcoming highlights for this project. In late July or early August, the consultants are going to hold their first round of stakeholder focus groups and public engagement. Those focus groups and engagement sessions will give an introduction to the study, will give an overview of existing conditions, review their market and service analyses, and solicit feedback from attendees. So it'll be a two-way conversation, sharing info and gathering info from the public and from the stakeholders. You will hear about these stakeholder groups and public engagement soon. So I will send out all of that information through the RTP email list. You'll also be able to find this information on the project website. The project website should go live very, very soon, and I will share that with you guys through the email list. The project website includes information about the project, announcements such as announcements about upcoming engagement sessions or focus groups, a study area map, breaking it down so you can see exactly what each of those 3 study areas looks like. It'll include all the project documents. So as some of those deliverables are produced, they'll be posted onto this website so the public can review. And there will be a survey link, which leads us to the other highlight, the MetroQuest survey. So the consultants are working on a survey that will supplement the public engagement that they'll be doing likely virtually. So that's just another exciting thing to look for as this project keeps moving forward. And that's it.
So I'll open it up for questions. Questions on either of the studies? I don't see any. Jessica, I just had one question. Does AECOM stand for anything, or is it just alphabet soup?
It's a good question. I'll have to get back to you.
I was curious. I didn't see it in the report, and I can sometimes remember these alphabet soup, better if I know what they actually stand for, but it might not. I mean, anyway. All right. Any other questions on either of the studies? All right. Moving on then. We, I guess 5:30, we are maybe running a little bit. No, actually, we're not too far behind. That's good. Nominating committee for 21 election of officers. So in July, we'll need to deal with our election of officers. And the bylaws say that the chair can names a nominating committee. I was really happy that Bea helped me with this, because when she read the agenda, she called me and said, I will volunteer like I did last year to be on the nominating committee, which gave me at least 50%. So Bea volunteered. I'm opening it up for any other volunteers that would like to serve with Bea. Oh, and Nikaya is back. She's just not on the screen, to let everybody know. She just came into the chat. So not hearing any other or seeing any other volunteers. Lloyd, you worked really well with Bea last year. Would you mind doing that for me?
There is no one with whom I would rather work on such a matter than Bea.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Have our nominating committee. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And actually my exact words to Diantha was, I will do it if Lloyd serves with me.
Okay, so we're all good.
The Blarney is flowing well today.
Yeah, there you go. You make a beautiful team. Okay, thank you. Moving on then for the MPO update. Sandy, this is yours, sweetheart. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I might catch us back up to our agenda schedule. So just a couple of things that I want to share. First of all, the CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, met earlier this week, and one of the things that they did was approve the 2022 to 2027 six-year improvement program. And the reason why that's important to you all is that that included approval for the projects that were recommended for funding in round 4 of SmartScale. So starting in 2027, some of those projects should start coming on board. Since Chuck's still on their call, he can provide any information if anybody has additional questions. But because there was this additional infusion of funding due to the newly implemented wholesale fuels tax, that funding starts coming on board, has already started coming on board, but it hasn't been programmed out yet. So 6 years of funding was basically allocated to fund the projects that were approved starting 6 years from now. What that means is that there could be an opportunity that some of the projects could be escalated and come on board faster than what was originally planned, but they're going to start with the current projects, in the list. They're going to work through the projects that were approved first, but it's possible that we might not have to wait till 2027 to see some of these projects started. It could be a little bit early. Do you want to say anything about that, Chuck, since we have you available to answer those questions?
Yeah, that's correct. What we're doing is focusing on the current projects that are already under design, and we're going to fast track those, and then we're going to accelerate the schedules on some of the other ones. We're not sure which ones, but that's what the plan is moving forward.
I'll put in my plug for the pedestrian bike overpass over 29. It also has a transit stop, which would be lovely. Just saying.
Yeah, I think that's going to be good. I think that will be a group project, and we'll probably do all those projects together, but we'll see.
Okay.
Sort of like what we did we did a package of projects for a number of projects in the Albemarle, Charlottesville area that we put together that's under construction, and include the DDI conversion at exit 124. But there were a number of roundabouts, like the 151 roundabout, the roundabout up at Route Prophet Road and Route 20. All those were grouped together into one group of projects that design build team is working on. So we'll probably look at the hydraulic package as a similar type of concept, and those will all be grouped together.
You were kind, Chuck, to stay. We really appreciate you staying for this portion. Nikaya, you just jumped on. Did you have a question?
No, I didn't know my camera had turned off. So.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Any other comments or questions about the SmartScale approvals? Sounds good. All right.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to let you know about a couple of resolutions of support that the MPO reviewed last night. Let me see, where did my screen go? Okay. The first one, so there are a couple of grant programs that we use. SmartScale is one of the most important ones because that is what funds big transportation projects, and there's not a match requirement, even though often localities like Albemarle and Charlottesville will contribute a local match, but there are some other grant programs that are pursued. And so these were a couple that are being applied for this round by the City of Charlottesville. This is through the Transportation Alternatives program, which is basically to support bike and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as there are some other ways that this can be used, like for historic preservation of historic transportation sites like depots, or the Afton Tunnel, if you're familiar with that. That was a Transportation Alternatives funded project. But the City of Charlottesville is applying for two, and I'm just going to run through these briefly. The first one is that they had requested transportation alternatives funding successfully previously for the construction of a bridge near Meadow Creek at this point right here. And so what they are doing this round is they are asking for additional funding to build some multi-use paths from some of the points along the existing transportation network to provide better connectivity to this bridge. So you can see these points A, D, and E are the points that they're trying to connect to. So the bridge will provide a shared use path access to points across the bridge from Greenbrier Drive to Brandywine Drive to Mickey Drive. So at their meeting last night, this was one of the projects that the MPO voted to support through a resolution. And then the second one that that is requested is a slightly different type of transportation alternatives grant, and that's the non-infrastructure grant for safe routes to school programming. It's new that the safe routes to school funding is going through the transportation alternatives program. It was a funding source before, it was just categorized a little bit differently. But the City of Charlottesville is asking for funding to support a staff person to be their safe routes to school coordinator. And so this person is going to do some of the program implementation around the safe routes to school. And it's funded for a full-time position through this, this grant. And then there's a third grant that the policy board voted on to support through a resolution of support. That's from a different source, which Jessica will talk about in a second. But this is the RAISE grant through Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. So this is one that the PDC is applying for, and I'll let Jessica talk a little bit more about this grant.
Thanks, Sandy. Could I actually share my screen? I made a couple of changes.
Yes.
Thanks. All right, everyone. So TJPDC staff are seeking the Regional Transit Partnership support for a grant application for RAISE. RAISE stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. It was previously BUILD, and before that, TIGER. The purpose of this fund is to make capital investments in surface transportation that will have a significant local or regional impact. And you can apply for two different types of RAISE grants. You can apply for a construction grant to actually construct one of these projects, or you can apply for planning funding to plan a project like this. And we are applying for a planning grant, just to clarify. There is no match needed for rural areas, and the Charlottesville area counts as a rural area for the purposes of this grant program. And that's just based on population. So we don't need a match for this project. In fiscal year 20, the TJPDC requested just over $700,000 to create a Charlottesville Regional Multimodal Transportation Station Master Plan. And the purpose of that master plan would have been to meet the capacity, accessibility, and safety demands of Charlottesville Union Station and improve the surrounding area. And Charlottesville Union Station is the Amtrak station in downtown Charlottesville. Unfortunately, that application was unsuccessful at the time, but in our debrief for that application, we were encouraged to reapply. They said it had scored really well, just didn't work out this time, and they just wanted us to come back next time. So that's what we're trying to do. So in my next slide, I have a picture of a map of the area. So in the very center of the screen here, or close to the center, this is the Amtrak station. It has a now defunct restaurant next to it. There's this large parking lot here. This is Main Street. This is heading towards UVA, and this is heading towards downtown Charlottesville to the east. The capacity issues that we mentioned are such that the Amtrak station doesn't currently meet the size suggestions that Amtrak sets out for the number of boardings and alightings that it sees every year. And with continued investment in passenger rail, we expect them to continue to not be able to meet those size suggestions. So we need a bigger station in order to serve all the people using passenger rail there. There are some accessibility issues where the only ADA accessible entrance to the station itself is along the platform here, which isn't an ideal way for people to get in. And there are some safety issues like lighting, pooling water, and some other concerns. So these issues remain. We want to plan for a future where this Amtrak station can meet our community's needs and encourage the rail travel. So we're looking for, we have a resolution in your packet And we'd love for you to support that application.
So opening up for thoughts, comments.
I have a just question about the conversations with the owner that was going on with that property. Are they going in a better direction?
Great question. So for anyone who doesn't know, that 3.3 acre site that I showed on the map is actually privately owned. The building is also privately owned and leased to Amtrak. That I don't know where those conversations stand right now. I know that they are ongoing and they will continue to be ongoing. However, the fact that the property is in private ownership does not prevent us from applying for a planning grant. So we don't know where that property will end up, but it's not, the private ownership is not preventing us from application at this time.
And Mayor Walker, I can also add that Mr. Boyles has recently been in contact with that property owner and sent him a letter letting him know that we intended to apply and offering him the ability to give us any feedback. So he has been trying to communicate with him to let him know that this is an interest of us to continue to look at what improvements could happen on that property.
Great question, Nakaya. Thank you. Anybody else? Comments, questions? I'm certainly in favor of this. I mean, we all know that station is not adequate for, or at least most of us know it that have used it. Let's put it that way. So, yeah.
Chair McKeel, are you looking for a motion?
I am. If everyone feels comfortable and there are no more comments or questions, I am. Yes.
So moved.
Second.
So I heard Lloyd, I think, pop up with a quick second. Again, teamwork from these two. That's pretty good. All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve the resolution that was in your packet to fund Charlottesville Regional Multimodal Transportation Station Master Plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? So Jessica, you have it. There you go. That
Thank
passed.
you, everyone.
Yes, absolutely. We're running pretty close to time, although I have a couple of things I need to talk to you about at the very end of the meeting. So if we could get the transit providers updates going and we'll get through those and then I'll put a couple of things on the table. So first, Cat in City of Charlottesville, Garland, any updates?
Just one. As we're working through the final adjustments for the launch of our changes coming out of COVID, we were informed by the Rio Hill Shopping Center that they want us to remove the bus stop that goes through the parking. So we've been informed that they want us to do it no later than end of September. So we'll incorporate that into the changes and when we make the adjustments. Their reasoning was the shopping center will be undergoing a renovation of the storefronts, and the current bus route will not work with the vision of the shopping center.
So we would hope they'll come back after all of that's done and figure out where the bus stop might be most appropriate.
We're already working on something. It's not going to be in the shopping center. It'll be on the outskirts of it.
Great.
Yep.
Great. That's good.
Yep.
All right. Was that it, Garland? I'm sorry.
That's it.
Okay. UTS, Becca.
Okay, so, summer session is virtual. All of the student orientations are virtual this summer. UVA is planning on going back to essentially normal, both for academic programming and athletics. So you'll see a lot of increased activity toward the third week of August. We are still working on our service packages. We reported last week. We have till mid-July to announce it. So, watching advice from federal agencies, state agencies about bus boarding capacities and such. But until then, we continue to require masks, backdoor boarding. We have gone to a 30 passenger loading limit based on the advice of our epidemiologist team at UVA Hospital. And that factors in the masks, the vaccines, the length of the trip. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. Thanks.
Great. John, Karen Davis is not with us today. Randy, who's prepared from JAUNT to give an update?
I'll speak for Karen.
I think it's Stephen.
Oh, Stephen, I'm sorry. That makes sense. I saw Randy's name first. I apologize, Stephen.
No problem. So for the past couple months, our ridership has been creeping back ever so slightly. So we're going in the right direction, but it remains to be seen how new remote working policies are going to affect different parts of our ridership, particularly our connect routes. But we're going in the right direction. And our current capacity is a little constrained. So we're in the position that we're still operating at 50% capacity on our buses. So we're trying to strike a balance between hiring enough drivers to meet capacity, but also anticipating when we'll go back to 100% capacity in our vehicles, which will also help alleviate some of that demand. Our offices are going to be reopening on July 6th. We just adopted a new COVID policies to allow for that, following CDC guidelines. We also have a new remote work policy that'll be going into effect. So our staff will have the opportunity to continue doing that when appropriate. I don't know how many of you have met Jody Saunders. She's been with us for about a year in our director of marketing position. But she recently led an initiative to redo JAUNT's mission and vision statement. So we're pretty excited about that. She's also doing a project looking at our bus stop signage and redesigning that. And that kind of prompted some issues that I'd like to bring to this group. And one is whether there are any existing relationships between CAT and UTS coordinating on names of bus stops, so that in our literature, everybody is referring to the same stop by the same name. I think that would be a good thing for users of our systems. So if you all already have an agreement, we'd love to be involved in how we can stay in sync on that.
I'll contact you and Garland separate from here. We had an initiative going about the bus stops and shared bus stops that kind of went on hold for very many different reasons. So we just need to reconstitute that conversation, and I'll take that on, because if you guys don't mind, I mean, to prompt us to move forward. So thank you.
Yeah, and a related issue is making sure that we all have an understanding of how Google Maps handles our 3 separate GTFS feeds, so that when somebody's using Google Maps, they see all of the relevant routes at a stop, no matter which system provides that route. So we should probably build some understanding to make sure that we're doing what's necessary for those kinds of GTFS technologies.
Trying to make it seamless for the rider.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we really have to get there. Yeah.
I'll include that. And it was a big struggle for us to get on Google's because of, we go by building names so often, and, there isn't a cross street and such. So I'll just include that in the reconstitution of this discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Becca.
And I'll throw my plug in like I always do, and Garland's going to laugh, but if somehow or another we could figure out some names besides 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, I would love to figure out a way to get named the routes, at least have a combination name or something that we know what we're talking about when we talk about routes. Just throwing that out there, names and routes. Garland knows how I feel. I have to have the chart in front of me. Anyway, any other comments or thoughts? That sounds like really good work though, Stephen. Thank you. That's good.
Sure thing.
And Jim Foley, Albemarle County Public School Bus Transportation. There's Jim.
Thank goodness it's summer, although we're still transporting SPED students to private schools. Our summer school runs from July 6th to the 30th. We kind of based it on available drivers because a lot of our drivers are burnt out, and not everyone signed up for summer school. Becca, I appreciate you considering helping us, but I think we ended up at a good solution. Like I said before, we applied for 2 electric school buses. I'm not sure we'll get them, but we gave it a try. So we did go visit Louisa County, who did get 2 of the electric buses, and they love them. So, and plus Dominion came out with a program to reimburse schools for fast chargers, which would save hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's good news from Dominion. So that's all I had.
So Jim, what did they say about the way the electric buses performed for them? They start easily. What were their comments?
Oh, they drive very smooth. I drove one in Richmond about a year ago, and I drove one when we went to Louisa. It's very smooth, powerful. I drove a gasoline-powered bus about a year ago too, and it doesn't have near enough power to get up Afton Mountain with a football team. That would be difficult. But diesel and electric have enough power.
Right.
They're very quiet. Once you buy them, the maintenance costs are very low. I shouldn't probably say this, but there's a state contract coming out soon. And part of that will have a 15-year warranty on the battery. So there's no concern with battery life because it's backed up by a warranty. And I know the battery recycling technology is improving. So that's, you know, an area of concern down the road. But I think it's coming along where, I don't know if you know this, like your AA batteries that you recycle, almost all of it is reused. That recycling process is very mature, but for lithium batteries, it's not. So that technology has really come a long way in the last couple of years.
Well, and in 15 years, it'll be I mean, they will have figured it out, I would think.
Yeah, one would hope.
Right.
I would
That's
think so.
great. Good news. Sounds good. I'm interested in your experience driving them. Any other comments for any of the operators that just gave reports? All right. I have under business, the next item is other business. Does anybody have anything they want to bring forward under other business? I have one, well, actually I have two things, but the first thing I wanted to ask about is when we began the RTP, we always had an update from the CAT Advisory Board. And the last time we had someone here from the CAT Advisory Board, they were talking about how they were working on their bylaws and the city attorney had approved the bylaws. And I was just wondering if we could have a quick update from Garland or Lloyd or someone, but we had a speaker this afternoon that mentioned the CAT Advisory Board. And what is the status of that group right now?
Well, I can tell you when I started on council a year and a half ago, it was thought of as being something that council would appoint and so on. And we didn't have enough members, and for a lot of other reasons, things got sort of reconsidered. And we had a meeting last fall where we were looking at all kinds of different issues with boards, commissions, and we basically decided at that point that there really wasn't a lot of reason why the CAT Advisory Board should be sort of a council level appointment. It ought to be something that worked directly with Garland and the transportation piece more directly rather than having us involved. So at this point, I think council has sort of stepped back a little bit, and I don't know, Garland, is that your sense of where we stand procedurally with all of this?
So I think it was
not trying to throw you under the bus. I just don't remember.
I thought it was a little bit more nuanced than that. So
Okay.
council asked whether they thought the CAT Advisory Board was still viable. You remember you were contemplating even removing it. I told them no. I thought it was a good board to continue to have. I think it needed to be looked at, and I asked for your authorization to hire a consultant to look at what the CAT Advisory Board does, and then bring back a recommendation to council sometime late this year or early next year. And you authorized me to do so.
Nakaya, you look like you had taken your mute off. So did you want to say something too?
Yeah, I was just gonna say what Garland just said. We were just waiting on recommendations. There was a discussion around wanting to increase like the business community participation in the board. And so we just hadn't had a new proposal in front. And then you had talked about making sure there was an Albemarle County representative on the board. And so we just hadn't had the presentation yet to vote on it.
Yeah, with the pandemic, I haven't been able to get a consultant. So we're gonna get the consultant. We're gonna get them started on board. Give us a couple of months, and then we'll come back with a recommendation to council.
Okay, and that's great. And then if you could just keep this particular body informed about what's going on with it as well, that would be great with that group. Once you get it going, and that would be lovely. I'd appreciate it. All right, the other thing I'd like to just discuss briefly, and I know we're running shy on time. One of the speakers this afternoon spoke to the representative from C3, spoke to the possibility of getting a group together, or maybe a roundtable group, to look at what transit options we might have for our buses, what would be the right mix for buses in our community. Christine, do you want to speak to this? Because I know you've had some discussions about it as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about is in the next couple of months, potentially bringing together a workshop or a roundtable to just fit everybody at the table so we can all share all of the information we have, results from studies that are being done, data on the different types of buses. I think it's something that there's a real momentum and a craving for us all to share information and make sure that we're all on the same page. So it's just something that I would suggest that the RTP kind of sponsors that workshop, that round table outside of a normal RTP meeting, so that it can be solely focused on this topic.
Any thoughts or concerns or objections or comments about that? You're muted, Garland, if you want to say.
So the concern I do have is that we need to, if we're going to do this, we need to make sure that the folks, it is unusual for community members to be involved in the selection of a bus. It's weird. The community doesn't get involved when you're talking about selection of a fire truck or a police vehicle or any of the other vehicles associated with the county. So it is a little interesting that there's a lot of concern about selection with individuals who have not ever run a transit system and don't have any information about running and what it takes to make sure that I'm going to be reliable. So from that aspect, I think it is best left to the professionals to make that decision. We can bring the information back, and we will. There's a study that will be completed, and we will have that information before everybody. But the FTA is requiring me to sign off on the purchases. I'm not going to be subject to a committee telling me to buy an electric bus when I have no confidence that it's going to work. The FTA is not going to allow me to just dip my toe in, which is why we're doing this study, so I can make sure we have a plan. The plan will basically spell out whether we need what infrastructure we need, and then we'll move forward so I can insert it into my TDP and then get that moved forward into the state's plans. That's the process I would love for us to follow, and that's the process I have to follow when I'm going with the state or the feds anyway.
Well, and I don't think we're disagreeing with you. It's not a matter of the public telling you what buses to buy. It was really an effort to educate and talk about the different options and educate. That's all. And you have a study going on right now. So would you be able to bring that back at that time?
The study has not started. We've said this 3 or 4 times. We're at this point trying to get through the scope. The scope will be finished hopefully in another week or so. I've told C3 that I would share the information with them. I haven't even shared it with the city manager yet. I need to share it with the state. There's a lot of people that needs to see this component. So nothing CAT does or nothing that I do is ever done in a vacuum. So the individuals who need to see it will see it, and we will move forward with that process.
Okay. All right.
I'll just add, can I add one thing on what Garland said is, again, I think it's the community wants to see, or community partners want to see what type of vehicles are available, and and things of that sort, and things of that. But I will let you know what Garland's talking about, whether it's electric buses or CNG buses or something else. He's doing some of this for us as a plan, because we've turned down. We're really promoting electric buses, but we turn down grants when areas just want to get one to see what it's like. We want the investment to see that the planning is going through, and whether again CNG or clean diesel or just changing fleet types. We really want to see this over time, what that looks like. Now, again, a lot of this is going to be public information at certain times because of the plans and things of this sort. But we really do press that as being a part. And Garland tell you, we require a lot of six-year plans to see, and so I will tell you, there were some who applied for certain vehicles to us this past year, and we went into their plans. If they weren't there, they were denied those grants. So, I think it's important, though, what some of this is going on, to take a look, because it is a changing environment. And Garland and I talked a lot about this on Tuesday at a meeting. So that, there are things to be, but he is under being an urban system. He has FTA, and then getting state money from us. He has us, how you want to term those, our oversight to those things. But it is, hopefully sometimes us and FTA are talking, so we don't make him do two different things. But I'm sure sometimes in his mind, we probably are. But
I would just can I just speak back on one thing that Neil said, that part of what the requirements for me is to make sure that before I can insert it into my TDP, I have to have a plan, which is why I need to do the study before we have a conversation about making any changes. So if I do not do the study and I go make a selection for EVs, they are going to get rejected. So we are doing what we're supposed to do. We're following the process. We're going to do the study. And then if it comes out that it's whatever the number suggests, then we can move forward. A lot of us want to rush, but there's a plan and a process that I have to follow, and I can't. And if I skip any of those steps, we're going to get rejected. I would love for us to follow so we can move forward and then make the investment, whatever that turns out to be, and then the state will sign on to get us the ability to ask for federal dollars.
And I think it's important to have had this discussion so everybody in the community is aware. So it's all good. So we'll be hearing back further as you can share it with us. Christine, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Garland and Neil. Certainly I don't think anybody's asking for this conversation to occur quickly. We want to make sure that we have everything that we need to be able to talk through this. So I just appreciate your input on that and putting it on the radar for something that we would like to do in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you, Christine. And thank you, Garland and Neil. I appreciate it. All right. It is 6:06. I apologize for being a little bit late. I think we are set. Jessica, when is our next meeting? I don't have the date in front of me so we're going to adjourn until July
22nd.
July 22nd. So hearing no objections, I will adjourn us till July 22nd. Thank you. And y'all have a lovely evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.